Hello, my name is Sora Tanjasiri, and this is a lecture on community organizing and advocacy for health equity. I'd like to start by asking you to imagine for a moment that you are in your community. What does your community look like? And what are two most important things you want people from outside your community to know about your community? We'll take a few seconds to think about these. I'd like you to keep in mind your community as we go through the rest of this lecture today. So first, I want to start with the core concept of community organizing. This is the process by which people in communities are helped to identify problems or goals they have collectively set. How do we work in our own communities to improve them? And really, community organizing takes an orientation of how people identify themselves as a member of their community, such as what you just did in your mind. And how do we align that orientation with larger systems, policy, other organizations, and engage with one another to work towards community change? And here are just some pictures of communities working together to improve. One way we can do this, of the many ways, is through policy advocacy. It's that notion that we can work for we do intentional activities initiated by ourselves to affect the policy-making process. And when policy-making comes together with community organizing, we can really work to remove the inequities and work towards more social justice, as we discussed in the previous lecture on health equity. And as we discussed in that previous lecture, HIV/AIDS is one of those community efforts that really resulted in policy changes, including such things as the passage of the HOPE Act of 1988, American Disabilities Act of 1990, which not only protects people with disabilities from discrimination, but also covers people with HIV/AIDS. Or the 1990 Ryan White Comprehensive AIDS Resources Emergency Act, and the 1991 Housing Opportunity for People with AIDS Act, which provides housing assistance to people with HIV/AIDS. These are some of the many policy changes that helped to create a more equitable society for people with HIV/AIDS. And in fact, the United States has a long history of community organizing for policy change to improve the health and welfare of certain populations. Starting in the 1880s, when social workers organized for system change among immigrants and low-income people, such as these newsboys and low wages among newspaper sellers. In the 1990s, industrial workers of the world started to work on unionizing of workers. In 1920, a lovely example of how the Colored Marine Employees Benevolent Association organized strikes to change discriminatory policies. And then fast forward to the 1960s, the founding of the United Farm Workers that organized migrant farm workers to improve wages and working conditions. The later 1960s founded the women's movement that worked for equal workplace opportunities and reproductive rights. And finally, like I've spoken about in the past, the 1980s that founded organizations such as ACT UP to advocate for HIV/AIDS research, treatment, and social services. So what do all of these efforts have in common? There are some assumptions of community organizing that are true. First, people should participate in making major changes in their communities. It should not be imposed by outsiders. When you imagined your community, you knew what it looked like and you knew who was in your community. And so really making change among people within communities is a key assumption of community organizing. Communities also have the capacity to address their own problems. Number three, the assumption of community organizing is that changes that happen within communities that are self-imposed rather than imposed by outsiders have a meaning and a permanence that can lead to long-term community change. And finally, the last assumption is that democracy really requires cooperative participation and action among people within communities. And we all have the opportunity and the capacity to learn the skills to make community changes ourselves. I'd like to now hear from or have you hear from some of the voices of community organizers. What is the role of community organizers to promote community change? Here's a very nice video from the C.S. Mott Foundation showcasing testimonies from community organizers about their role in promoting community change. Can you identify 2 ways that people who are maybe not within a community, such as perhaps your role as a COVID-19 contact tracer, can help communities still as a community organizer?
The community organizing, as I define it, is in terms of engaging members of a community in a proactive way to decide what they want to do in their community. You know? It's not a process that I will look at it from the point of view of outside, deciding, okay, this is what needs to happen in this community, and then making the decision in the absence of that, which is what happens today. You know, that is the normal way of doing things in society. In terms of organizing, but you need to organize that community in order to present a front to deal with the other situation. Now, it is up to the community to decide what is that they want to, and that's a process by itself in which they make the decisions. But then, because of lack of knowledge, lack of experiences, lack of access to information, most of the time, they don't know how to go about it. So in the concept of organizing is to enable them to have that information, to have an understanding of the process, and be in a position to make to take a decision or a position to address the need.
We can't necessarily say to someone who has the basic opportunities in life, you know, what they need to do. It's their choice. I think what we look at is there's too many people that don't even have those basic necessities met. And if we can work with those folks so they have enough power to bring up the floor, you know, in a way we kind of feel like everyone else is better off. Sort of the canary in the mine is okay, the miners are going to be okay. And so for us, we're trying to help actually really everyone, but by doing it, we believe we do it by lifting up that bottom.
Most of us, if there's a problem or something goes wrong, we say, well, I know what I'll do. I'll get on the internet, I'll call my whatever, and I'll make a complaint. There are communities that exist in America that are afraid to have a voice because of what could happen to them. We're not all living in the same America. And there are communities that are afraid to speak out. They don't have the tools. They don't have a computer. They don't have, and who helps them? Who helps them to recognize that they have a voice and they are a part of America? You know, you live in America. You do have some rights. Who helps them? Who helps them? Who helps them? And if not you or me, then who? You know, it's like being poor in America isn't a crime, but we treat it that way.
So I hope you enjoyed those testimonies. And I want to end with the last slide about what can we learn about how community organizers can help to become be effective community change agents, and how you can be effective as a contact tracer in community organizing. I'd like to suggest that we have 4 takeaways that we can learn from. Number 1 is the importance of building relationships. It's listening to people. It's learning about what their hopes and their worries are, and it's talking to them about what they'd like to see change. Number 2, it's about understanding how we as contact tracers can relate COVID-19 to people's beliefs and values about bringing everyone up together. Number 3, it's about action. How can we work together to help make them healthier, especially in terms of coronavirus and COVID-19 prevention? And then finally, a larger challenge. What are the next steps to making their communities healthier for everyone? And I'd like to leave you with a reminder. You are not just learning how to be contact tracers to reduce coronavirus transmission and COVID-19 in the short run, but you also have the opportunity to build relationships with people that can lead to collaborations to make all of our communities healthier in the long run. Thank you.